We were playing in my last D&D campaign, some of which you can watch on YouTube, and the players had been given a map of the Underdark by the Deep Gnomes. There were two tunnels. To the left was the passageway to the city of the Glass Pool, which they knew was their destination. To their right was a passageway that led to
certain death.
It said there was a lightning lizard down there, and the gnomes explained that they had never been past the lightning lizard. It was too dangerous, and that many adventuring parties, just like the player characters, had been down here looking for treasure and tried to fight it.
They tried and failed?
They tried and died.
This caused a real schism in the group. Phil, sort of the leader of the party, argued, listen, we have a quest, we know where we're supposed to go, we have a map showing us how to get there, why screw around? EJ, a newly minted noble, said, but there's almost certainly going to be a lot of cool treasure down here, more experience points, which means we'll be higher level when we get to the city of the Glass Pool and more likely to succeed. And you might think of that as metagaming, but it's not. Certainly their characters are aware of the fact that they are much better at being warlocks and eldritch knights now than they were when they set out from town. They argued about this for about an hour. It was a huge, big conflict in the group. And at the end of the night, they had to agree to disagree. I encouraged them. I let them know, listen, we're all coworkers. We all are going to be here tomorrow anyway. We'll be here for the rest of the week. I can just get together with Phil's half of the party tomorrow night and EJ's half of the party the night after that, and we can both play through your adventures until eventually you meet up again. I, the dungeon master, was advocating, in other words, to split the party.
I think we better split up.
Good idea.
Yeah, we can do more damage that way.
Hey everybody, Matt Colville here. If you are a D&D player and you go online, it's not going to be long before you see a message from somebody on Twitter or on Reddit or in chat saying, don't split the party. It's this common wisdom that has been passed down, and it's become like a shibboleth. It's this thing we say to each other to reinforce the idea that we're all part of the same group, we all know the same things, we're all having the same conversation. I say don't split the party to show off the fact that I know the common wisdom. But I personally am deeply suspicious of common wisdom, typically because it flies in the face of my own experience. But like the admonition against playing evil characters, on the premise that it can be disruptive and tear parties apart, my reaction is not that that's not true, but that it can be managed and that mature players can deal with it, and it opens up a colossal amount of new options and fun. The same thing is true for not splitting the party. It is 100% true that splitting the party can turn into a kind of degenerate nightmare scenario, but it doesn't have to, and that's what we're going to talk about. The reason I advocated for splitting the party was because I personally love that experience of the party splitting up, much like Lord of the Rings, going and having their own adventures, and then getting to meet up again and describe to each other what has happened. Anytime the players have to describe to the other players the experiences they've had in the campaign, it seems much more real to me and I think to the players. And of course, I've been doing this for a long time. I am not afraid of splitting the party. True, we all work together, so it's very easy for us to get together on a subsequent night. It's not a huge scheduling nightmare. We're all already at work anyway. And while this I know is unusual, it is very similar to the way it was when we were teenagers and in college and could basically play whenever we wanted. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your point of view, they did not split the party. Having slept on it and thought about it when they came to work the next day, many of them felt terrible about the idea of playing D&D without the others. For them, that was part of the fun. So the half of the party that wanted to fight the lightning lizard just gave up and said, you know what, Phil, you're right, let's go to the city of the Glass Pool. The thing I really respected in Phil, and we may have to do a whole new episode on this because it's kind of the theme of the last two videos, was Phil's commitment to dealing with the consequences of his actions. He was willing to go down to the city of the Glass Pool alone, even though he knew it meant almost certainly he would die, because he thought, listen, that's what my character would do. I don't mind if my character dies in a situation like that. I'll just roll up a new character. He would have been unhappy to lose Graves. He liked Graves, but he would have been happy knowing Graves died doing what the character would do, and that reality, that verisimilitude, has value. I think if all the players are mature and willing to deal with the repercussions of splitting the party, then not only can it be realistic, and this is what the characters would actually do, it can be a lot of fun. In my friend John's campaign, this was about 25 years ago, we were playing high level, like 13th level mercenaries, given a job to infiltrate an evil keep and rescue some person or some object within. One of the players was playing a high level master thief, and I looked at that player and said, okay, go get us a map of that place. He did. The rest of us did nothing that evening while we watched Craig infiltrate the keep, making stealth rolls, assassinating those people who detected him, and coming back with a map of the keep where all the guards were, and where all the traps were, where all the secret doors were. And even though we split the party and I did basically nothing that night, it was cool as hell. It was very dramatic for us to sit and watch Craig because at any minute he could be caught and ultimately killed, and there was nothing we could do. He was so far ahead of the rest of us, there was no way we could have helped him. That drama, that heightened drama, that inability for us to help someone while they went off on their own added to the drama and the tension of the evening. It was not boring for us to sit and watch Craig. Likewise, in my friend Jim's campaign, we spent an entire evening with me just negotiating with the king of the elves. There was nothing really for the rest of the party to do. We weren't physically separated, but I was essentially playing my own game with Jim, and the rest of the party just had nothing to do but sit and watch. Even though we hadn't split the party, the effect was the same. But because what was happening, me role-playing with the king of the elves, was dramatic, it was a memorable evening. It was something my friends and I talked about for years afterwards. So whence comes this admonition against splitting the party? Well, the most direct and obvious reason people say that is because if you split the party, you are halving your effectiveness. And the adventurer does not know that you are planning on splitting the party. The orcs in the next room are the orcs in the next room. And if you only send half your party against them, you are twice as likely to fail. I think that's the primary reason people repeat this prayer over and over again, don't split the party, is they are afraid that by splitting the party, everyone will fail, there'll be catastrophic failure, and characters will die. That can happen. But like Phil in Night Below, Phil was okay with his character failing as long as he was being true to himself. That, I think, is what separates mature players from new players, is that mature players are willing to deal with the consequences of their actions. They don't make every single decision based on the mechanically optimal thing to do. They spend time thinking about the reality of the world and the reality of their character, and they enjoy making decisions, even if those decisions can result in failure, that are true to that reality. Splitting the party in two does double your chances of failure, but if you're in an adventure where, for instance, there's a time limit, splitting the party can increase your chances of beating the clock. Splitting the party increases your chances of failure, and that increases the amount of drama because now the characters have to survive and thrive with fewer teammates, and that can be exciting. But there's another reason players say don't split the party, and that's because, like the group I was describing at the beginning of this video, people show up to the table because they want to play D&D with their friends. And many of them will start to feel uncomfortable and unhappy at the very idea of splitting up and going their separate ways. They will think to themselves, well, I could have stayed home and played a video game if I was going to play a game by myself. I think that, again, much like playing an evil character, is an issue of trust. They are not yet aware, because they haven't done it, that them watching the other group do something cool on their own and then switching back to them while they do something cool can be a lot of fun, can be very dramatic. But you can't really psychoanalyze your players and try to convince them that the thing that they don't want, they really do want. If the players feel weird and they're unhappy about the idea of splitting the party, you have to respect that. There's two basic ways to split the party. There's the sort of advanced way that I described earlier, where each group literally splits up and you play at different times of the week until you both meet again and resolve. I think that is pretty rare. There are, in this day and age, I don't think there are that many groups that can afford time-wise to do that. But if you can, it's spectacular. The other way, and the way that requires a lot more engagement and patience on the part of the players, is splitting the party while they're all at the table. And the dungeon master, this is the tricky part, having to spin these two plates and keep both groups happy and engaged while switching from one to the other. I think this is basically impossible in combat. I think there are some very simple combat scenarios, detecting traps and discovering that there are enemies beyond the door. I think those are the kinds of things you can do with a split party, everyone at the same table. But actually trying to run two different combat scenarios at the same time, I've been doing this for, I don't know, since 1988, so 30 years. I don't think I've ever done that. I don't think I've ever even tried that. So you, as a dungeon master, if the party wants to split up, you have to be willing to say, no. If you don't have the capacity or the desire to actually physically break up into different groups and play at different times, you, the dungeon master, are suddenly now on the hook to run two entirely different combats at the same time. That seems like a nightmare to me. And at this point, it's time to talk to the players about the social contract we've all entered into together. And that is, I have agreed and I am willing and excited to run D&D for you folks, but there is a limit to my powers, and running two groups at the same time, I'm sorry, there's no way for me to do that. If you describe it that way, I am sure your players will understand and try to work out a solution that doesn't require you going insane. I think combat can be on the table as long as it's only an option for one of the two or more split groups. In other words, if one group is going to go down one part of the dungeon and maybe get in a fight, but the other group wants to stay and rest, I think this is perfectly reasonable. And if both groups want to split up in town, for instance, and go all do different things, not only is this reasonable, I think it's desirable. The trick to splitting the party in a narrative sense in town, for instance, where you don't have to worry about two entirely different combat encounters, is the principle of rising action. This is something that you learn if you watch a lot of TV, for instance, where there's often an A plot and a B plot. It's up to you, the dungeon master, to make sure that as one group is experiencing something cool, you pause the action and thereby keeping them in a state of what's going to happen next, while you then ramp up the next group. You've got these two sine waves that are moving through your plot. And this is not easy to do, but over time, as you do it more and more, it will become second nature. And this will give you incredible control over the pacing of your game as you cut between these two or more groups. When you cut, which moment you pick to leave one group while you go to the next is not a science, it is an art. But I think the basic principle is you've given this group something to think about. What that is, it can be almost anything. It can be, for instance, what's available in the shop. For instance, if the players are going shopping and you say, this shop has any of this type of item in this type of price range, you've given them some information and you can go to the other group, and thereby you've left them to sit there and do some shopping on their own while you play with this other group. There is a kind of archetype of player, and I think everyone is guilty of this to one extent or another, but that is the I always want to be everywhere player. In other words, when they are off talking to the blacksmith about armor and they hear that the players who have gone to the library to do research are having some dramatic moment, the player at the blacksmith suddenly wants to be there. They want to find a way to be in both places at once. They don't want to miss anything, but missing things and giving some players the chance to have their own experience and have their own knowledge and then get to communicate it to the rest of the players is, to me, again, I've said this before, one of the most fun parts of role-playing. One of the things I've done to great success is I've given the players a map of the town, and it doesn't have to be a real map. It's something you can just whip up on an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper that just has some of the shops, the libraries, the churches they can go to written on them, and then put this piece of paper on the table in front of the players and tell them, put your mini where your character is, because now that you've got even this abstract version of the town or the city, their mini can't be in two places at once. And that restricts the I want to be everywhere all the time impulse. Something to think about can also be giving them new information they didn't have before that's going to cause them to have a debate. Or you can ask the players some important question and then just say, you folks think about how you're going to answer that. Just saying, you folks think about how you're going to answer that will let them know this is an important question. How we answer is important. It'll give them something to talk about as you cut to the next group. Again, this isn't a science. I can't lay it all out for you, but I have had great success running a large group of players all running through. You may get to see this in the new campaign coming up because it's almost all of it is going to take place in a giant city. And you may see me screw it up because it's been a while since I've run D&D, but once we're back in the swing of things, ideally you will get to see many times where we're cutting back and forth from one group to the other. That's one of the reasons I want to stream my game, is because I want you folks to see things fail, because I think there's as much to learn from that as success, and ideally there will also be some successes. So give the players something to think about. Let them know this is your opportunity to think about how to answer this when you cut back and forth, and that will keep all the plates spinning. That will keep all the players engaged. Also, if something, you can tell, you'll get a chance, you'll be able to read the room. If something very dramatic is happening to one group of players, you can kind of sit on them for a while because the other players will be engaged, just like I was and the rest of the party was watching my friend Craig infiltrate this castle. We were fascinated. We had no idea what he was going to find, and the reward was so great. He came back with this crazy detailed map of the castle, and as a result, the rest of the adventure was a breeze. When you have mastered the principle of rising action, the idea that you always want to try to cut from one group to the other as you are nearing or at or just after the climax of a scene, you will find that letting your players run around in town, letting them cut between one plot, the A plot and the B plot and another, is not only possible, but it's fun and incredibly dramatic, especially if your players don't mind leaving the room and trading. We do this all the time, taking somebody outside and talking to them about what's going on, because then they come back and they have their own experience to relate to the players, and they will never relate what you told them precisely 100% accurately. They will always interpret it somehow, and that interpretation can be really amazing to see. When is it okay to split the party? It's okay to split the party when everyone understands what's at stake and everyone is willing to pay the consequences for this action. When is it not okay to split the party? It's not okay to split the party when it's going to ruin people's fun. Again, I think talking to your players about this ahead of time, letting them know, listen, I don't really have the mental capacity or desire to run two different groups. So for whatever reason, we're going to have to find a way for you folks to stick together. Or alternatively, letting the players know, listen, if you want to go your separate ways for a little while, that's great. We can either do it here because you're in town and I can cut between different subplots, or if we're going to go explore the dungeon, we can literally get together at different times of the week. Like playing evil characters, I think 80 to 90% of this is just communication. It's laying the groundwork for your players, setting expectations, and developing language to talk about this stuff. Don't let people online tell you how to play. Don't let people online say, never split the party, and just accept that as an axiom. It may be good advice, depending on the circumstance, or you may be denying yourself some really amazing adventure opportunities. Like the evil episode, I think the subject is too complex to cover in one video. So what we're going to do is we're going to go online live at 6 p.m. Pacific time, Wednesday night. That's tomorrow night, I think, or it might be the night after tomorrow, depending on how good an editor Jerry is.
I could have been a contender. I could have been somebody.
And we're going to talk about this, and I will field questions about splitting the party and maybe talk about more instances in which that happened. With these videos, with the live videos, there are sort of diminishing returns because eventually what people want me to do is they want me to audit their campaign, and I can't really do that. Unless I was at the table, I don't really know how to solve your problems. But the evil live stream went really well, and a lot of interesting stuff came out of it. And in fact, what I'm intending to do is make a sequel to the evil video based on that live stream. And we'll probably do the same thing with this. We'll go online tomorrow night, Wednesday night, 6 p.m. Pacific time. We'll talk about splitting the party. And then at some point in the future, I will take that discussion and turn it into a video like this. The live streams are up on Twitch for about 30 days afterwards. And some of them make good YouTube videos, but mostly I think the experience of sitting there watching me read chat is not, it's not fantastic. So my goal is to harvest the live stream for important lessons to add to the sequel video. That's it, folks. We talked about splitting the party. I think the next video, which is going to come fairly soon, is going to be a video about the table, because every time I show it off, people want to know, what is this table? Where did we get it? And it does a whole bunch of cool stuff that most folks don't know about. So it's not going to be, the next video won't be a running the game video, but it should come in the next day or two, because I still want to do one running the game video every week. This video, as with this studio, as with everything we're doing right now, is brought to you by the 30,000 people who pledged to Strongholds and Followers that have given me and my friends new careers and new lives. If you want more content like this, please pre-order Strongholds and Followers. There's a ton of amazing stuff in it. It should be out. The PDF should be available in a number of weeks. I did say weeks, not months. I hope there was something useful in here. If you have questions, come by the live stream Wednesday night, 6 p.m. It'll be on Twitch for a month afterwards. Next week, we're going to fudge some dice rolls, as all good DMs do. Until then, peace out.